The galaxy had many rooms like this, cold rooms, white rooms, rooms built not for comfort, but for certainty. Across 1,000 star systems, countless civilizations had independently arrived at the same architectural conclusion. Truth emerged best when life was stripped down to essentials. Light without warmth, silence without peace, order without mercy, this room was one of the finest examples ever grown. It hung suspended within the judicial core of the Keller Dominion, a sovereign power that spanned dozens of sectors and ruled for one simple reason: they were almost never wrong. The walls were not built, they were grown organic membranes coaxed into smooth, seamless curves, pale as bone and faintly luminous. Beneath their surface pulsed slow veins of living circuitry, transmitting data, thought, and judgment throughout the Dominion's vast legal network. The air smelled faintly metallic, sterilized beyond the point of lifelessness. No microbes, no dust, no randomness. Everything here was intentional. At the exact center of the chamber sat a single chair, and in that chair sat a human. His name was Elias Ward. By galactic standards, he was unimpressive. He was smaller than most species that pass judgment here, lighter, softer, fragile, looking 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin that bruised easily, no claws, no fangs, no natural armor, no bioluminescent threat displays or pheromonal dominance fields. His wrists were bound in gravitic restraints, localized singularities pinning him gently but absolutely to the chair's armrests. His ankles were locked to the floor by adaptive clamps that could restrain creatures 10 times his mass. His breathing was shallow but steady. His face bore the marks of recent violence, one eye swollen nearly shut. Dried blood along his temple and jawline, a split lip that reopened every time he spoke. To the Keller, none of that mattered. They did not see a person, they saw an anomaly. The Keller were tall, willowy beings with elongated skulls and 6-jointed limbs that folded and unfolded with fluid precision. Their skin was smooth and dark, almost reflective, and their 3 eyes, ranged in a triangular pattern, were glossy black and unblinking. They had no mouths in the human sense. Communication occurred through controlled vibrations of internal membranes translated into audible language, or, in interrogation chambers, transmitted directly into a subject's mind. The Keller had ruled their region of the galaxy for over 6 millennia, not through brute force, not through fear, but through calculation. They studied, they modeled, they predicted. Entire civilizations were mapped as equations. Rebellions ended before they began. Wars were avoided not through diplomacy, but inevitability. When outcomes were known, resistance became illogical. Order to the Keller was not a preference. It was the highest form of intelligence, and humans disrupted models. Elias Ward had been captured during what history would later call the Scorva incident. At the time, it was supposed to be nothing. A trade dispute, a misunderstanding of jurisdiction, a human convoy passing through Keller. Controlled space without the proper predictive clearance. The Dominion issued an ultimatum: surrender your ships, submit to inspection, allow civilian processing. The analysts ran the probabilities: 97% chance of compliance. Human history, after all, showed patterns of self-preservation. When faced with overwhelming authority, most species, most people chose survival. Instead, the humans fought. Not efficiently, not cleanly, not according to any known doctrine, they rerouted civilian ships into asteroid cover, armed medical transports, converted cargo haulers into mobile shields. They sacrificed engines to buy seconds. Seconds to evacuate children, seconds to jam targeting systems, seconds to let others escape. The Scorva incident lasted less than 20 minutes. It should have ended in 5. That alone warranted interrogation. 3 Keller inquisitors entered the chamber. Their footfalls made no sound against the living floor. They arranged themselves in a semicircle around Elias, perfectly spaced, angles optimized for psychological dominance. Data slates hovered beside them, translucent and alive with projections, probability trees branching endlessly, outcomes collapsing and reforming in real time. The lead inquisitor was Arch-Examiner Threx. He tilted his elongated head, studying the human as one might study a malfunctioning instrument. Human, Threx said. The words did not pass through air. They resonated directly inside Elias's mind, carried by a translation field tuned precisely to human neural structures. You will answer our questions. Resistance is illogical. Elias lifted his head slowly. The movement cost him effort. His muscles trembled slightly as he raised his gaze to meet theirs. One eye was nearly closed, but the other was clear. Focused, when he spoke, his voice was hoarse but calm. "You already made your first mistake," he said. Threx's eyes narrowed by a fraction of a degree. And what mistake is that? Elias met their gaze without flinching. You assumed this was an interrogation. The Keller believed fear was universal. Every known species, when isolated, restrained, and confronted with overwhelming authority, followed predictable patterns. Heart rate spikes, neural activity destabilizes, stress hormones flood the system, cooperation follows. It was not cruelty, it was efficiency. As Threx initiated the interrogation protocols, the room subtly changed. The walls darkened from pale white to a muted gray. Sensory fields activated designed to amplify discomfort without causing physical harm. A perfect balance, ethical, controlled. Elias's heart rate increased, but not enough. State your role in the Scorva incident, Threx demanded. I was a logistics officer, Elias replied. I made sure people got food, water, and a way home. That is false. Another inquisitor, Veles, interjected. His tendrils twitched, a sign of analytical irritation. Our scans indicate you coordinated resistance maneuvers. Elias exhaled slowly. I coordinated evacuations. You armed civilian vessels. I gave them a chance, Elias corrected. You gave them an ultimatum. The Keller exchanged silent neural signals. This was defiance, but not the kind they expected. No shouting, no pleading, no rage, just certainty. Threx adjusted the protocol. Images filled the air. Burning ships, shattered hulls, drifting bodies. The aftermath of human resistance, reconstructed in perfect detail. The intent was clear: guilt, fear, submission. Elias closed his eyes. For a moment, Threx believed the method was working. Then Elias spoke again. Those people trusted me, he said softly. You think showing me the cost will make me regret it. He opened his eyes. It reminds me why I do it again. The room's analytics spiked. The Keller interrogations were built on one core assumption. Self-preservation was the highest motivator. Humans complicated that assumption, explain, Threx said. Elias leaned back as far as the restraints allowed. You want to know why this went wrong, he asked, why your models failed. Silence, because you think survival is the point, Elias continued. For us, it's not. The words unsettled the room. Veles shifted. All species seek survival. Sure, Elias said. But humans, we choose meaning. Threx initiated a deeper neural scan. Pain receptors activated. Elias grunted, muscles tensing, jaw clenching hard enough to draw fresh blood. But he did not scream, meaning. Threx echoed, define. Elias forced his breathing to steady. It's why we run into fires, he said. Why we stay with sinking ships. Why we stand between monsters and kids who aren't ours. The pain increased. And why, Elias added through clenched teeth, you're starting to realize this room isn't protecting you. That was when the first alert sounded. Far beyond the interrogation chamber, the Keller Dominion's predictive network began to fail. It started small. Human ships, civilian ships, altered their courses unexpectedly. Medical vessels refused evacuation corridors and instead docked with damaged Keller outposts. Human engineers patched failing power grids without waiting for authorization. None of this fit any strategic model. Inside the chamber, Threx received cascading data warnings. "What is happening?" Veles demanded. Threx did not answer immediately. "Because," Elias was smiling. "You asked the wrong questions," Elias said. "You should have asked what happens when humans think someone's being treated unfairly. You are one human." Threx said sharply, "Your species is outmatched." Elias nodded. "Yeah," he said, "that's what everyone thinks." He looked past them as if seeing something they couldn't. "You see, humans are terrible at a lot of things. We're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the fastest." He swallowed, wincing as pain surged again. "But we are really good at one thing." Threx leaned closer. "What?" Elias met his gaze, showing up. Outside the chamber, the Dominion began to fracture. Human diplomats broadcast unfiltered footage of the Scorva incident across neutral systems. Human volunteers refused to abandon wounded Keller soldiers. Civilian populations questioned orders. Authority built on certainty could not survive unpredictability. In the chamber, Threx dismissed the other Inquisitors. He stood alone with Elias. "You are not afraid," Threx said. Elias shook his head slowly. "Oh, I'm terrified," he admitted. "I just don't let it choose for me." Threx studied him. "The human was injured, restrained, outnumbered, and yet unbroken. What would you have us do?" Threx asked. Elias's expression softened. "Listen," he said. "You don't need to win this." Threx disengaged the restraints. The decision would ripple across the Dominion. Years later, Threx would record a private reflection. "We believed humans were irrational. We were wrong. They simply valued things our models could not measure." And for the first time, the galaxy understood
sterile
what
light
it truly
of the
meant to
interrogation
be human.
chamber reflected off the polished durasteel walls, illuminating the faces of the three figures seated around a low, hexagonal table. On one side, two beings of the Atrian hegemony, species 743 on the galactic classification scale, sat rigid and imposing. Their skin, a mottled gray-green, was tough and scaled. Their eyes, multiple and faceted, shimmered with an unsettling intelligence. Commander Xylar, the senior interrogator, was a towering figure, his mandibles clicking with barely contained impatience. His counterpart, researcher Threll, was smaller, more wiry, his 6 slender fingers dancing over a datapad, eager to record the expected confession. Across from them, seemingly unimpressed by the intimidating presence, sat a human. John, as he had introduced himself, was a deceptively ordinary specimen of species 681. His short, dark hair was slightly disheveled. His blue eyes, startlingly bright in the harsh light, scanned the room with a calm that Xylar found utterly baffling. He wore a simple, gray jumpsuit, standard issue for all detention subjects, yet on John, it seemed almost defiant. "Subject John," Xylar's voice, a guttural rasp translated perfectly by the universal translator embedded in the table, echoed in the small chamber. "You are accused of unauthorized entry into restricted hegemony space, multiple acts of property damage, and the willful obstruction of justice." John leaned back in his chair, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "I was lost," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the severity of the charges. "And I merely redirected a few asteroids that were on a collision course with my vessel. As for obstruction, I believe I was merely attempting to explain my predicament." Threll snorted, a sound like gravel shifting. "Lost? In a fully mapped sector of the galaxy. And you redirected hegemony mining facilities? Your explanation is illogical, human. Perhaps, John conceded, his smile widening slightly. But then, humanity has always been a little illogical, wouldn't you agree? XYLAR slammed a scaled fist on the table. The sound, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, was designed to intimidate. John didn't flinch. Do not mock us, human. The Atrian hegemony has been policing this sector for millennia. We have seen countless species attempt to defy our laws. None have succeeded. I'm not trying to defy anything, Commander, John replied, his gaze unwavering. I'm just trying to understand why you're so angry. This calm, almost infuriatingly reasonable response only served to further irritate XYLAR. Angry? We are performing our duty. You have trespassed, endangered our assets, and now you equivocate. We will extract the truth, human. One way or another. Threll, ever the scientist, chimed in. Our psychological interrogation techniques are renowned throughout the quadrant. We can break any mind, human, even yours. He held up his datapad, displaying complex neural scans and psychological profiles. We have studied your species, your emotional vulnerabilities, your cognitive biases. We know exactly how to dismantle your resistance. John simply nodded, a contemplative look on his face. I'm sure you do, but have you ever considered that perhaps you don't know everything? The Atrians exchanged a glance. This human was different. Most species, when confronted with the Atrian hegemony's reputation, quivered. They offered desperate pleas, fabricated excuses, anything to avoid the full extent of Atrian justice. John, however, seemed to view the entire process as a rather dull academic exercise. Let us begin with the unauthorized entry. XYLAR began, his voice dropping to a low growl, laced with a subtle sonic frequency designed to induce anxiety. Your vessel, the Starseeker, was detected within restricted zone 7 Gamma. Why were you there? John sighed, a small, almost theatrical sound. As I said, I was lost. My FTL drive experienced a minor quantum flux anomaly. I was attempting a manual recalibration when I drifted into your territory. It was an accident. Threll's faceted eyes narrowed. Our sensors detected deliberate evasive maneuvers. Your drifting involved multiple high-G turns and a brief burst of hyperacceleration. That was the manual recalibration, John explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the galaxy. When the quantum flux occurs, the ship's navigation systems can become erratic. I was trying to correct its course, prevent it from impacting something important like, say, a hegemony mining facility. XYLAR's mandibles clicked. And the property damage? Our facilities were not redirected. They were impacted. Significantly. John's brow furrowed. Ah, yes, that. Well, in my defense, I did try to warn them. I broadcasted multiple distress signals. I even attempted to communicate directly, but your automated defense grid, it just kept firing. Our automated defense grid is designed to repel intruders, XYLAR bellowed, rising slightly from his seat. And it was doing a very good job of it, John agreed, nodding earnestly. But it was firing at my ship, which was trying to avoid hitting your facilities. It became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, wouldn't you say? If it hadn't kept firing, I might have had more time to maneuver. Threll tapped rapidly on his datapad. This is preposterous. Your story is full of inconsistencies and logical fallacies. To a highly logical species, perhaps, John said, shrugging. But humans, we're not always logical. Sometimes we just react. And sometimes those reactions, while not strictly logical, can be surprisingly effective. Xylar leaned forward, his voice now a low, menacing hiss. We have ways of making you truthful, human. We can access your memories, extract your deepest fears, expose your hidden motives. John's smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine concern. Is that really necessary, Commander? I'm telling you the truth from my perspective. Perhaps your perspective is simply different. The Atrians were used to fear. They were accustomed to defiance, to desperation, to cunning attempts to deceive. What they were not accustomed to was this disarming, almost childlike sincerity. It was infuriating. Let us move on to the obstruction of justice, Threll stated, his voice tight with frustration. When our patrol vessels boarded your ship, you resisted. You deployed a smoke bomb and then proceeded to disable multiple Atrian officers with what you later described as Nerf darts. John winced. Okay, in my defense on that one, I didn't know they were hegemony vessels at first. They just appeared out of nowhere, firing warning shots. I thought I was being raided by pirates, and the smoke bomb was just a recreational fog machine. The Nerf darts, well, I keep those for stress relief and target practice. I didn't want to actually hurt anyone, just slow them down until I could figure out what was going on. Xylar felt a vain throb in his temple. This human was either an unparalleled master of deception or genuinely, profoundly, unbelievably idiotic. He was leaning towards the latter, which was, in some ways, even more unsettling. You disabled 3 of our finest officers with foam projectiles, Xylar thundered. And no permanent injuries, I presume? John asked, his eyes wide with feigned innocence. I aimed for fleshy, non-critical areas. The shoulder, the thigh. I'm actually quite good with them. Threll threw his hands up in exasperation. This is ridiculous. We will not tolerate this charade, human. We will begin the neural interrogation. It will be unpleasant for you, but ultimately enlightening for us. John's expression darkened slightly. Neural interrogation? You mean mind reading? A far more advanced procedure, Threll corrected, a note of pride in his voice. We will access your subconscious, unravel your true intentions, and expose your lies. I see, John said slowly. He paused, his gaze drifting to a faint scratch on the polished wall. You know, humans have a saying, be careful what you wish for. Some things are best left undisturbed. Xylar interpreted this as a pathetic attempt at a threat. Are you implying we will find something unsettling, human? Some dark secret? Some hidden weapon? John looked back at them, a strange, almost pitying expression on his face. Oh, Commander, far worse. You might find yourselves. The Atrians dismissed this as more human nonsense. They activated the neural interrogation device, a complex array of electrodes and energy emitters that extended from the ceiling. A faint hum filled the chamber as the device lowered towards John. Do not resist, human, Threll warned, his fingers hovering over the controls. Resistance will only prolong the process. It will amplify the discomfort. John closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then, surprisingly, began to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh or a desperate one. It was a soft, almost wistful chuckle, as if at some private, amusing memory. "I'm not resisting," he said, opening his eyes and meeting Xylar's gaze. "I'm just preparing you for the ride." The device made contact, a soft click indicating full neural linkage. Threll initiated the scan. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then Threll gasped a sharp choke sound. His faceted eyes widened, flickering with an intensity that Xylar had never seen. "Threll, what is it?" Xylar demanded, a flicker of unease finally starting to prickle at him. Threll didn't respond directly. He was staring at the readings on his datapad, his slender fingers trembling as they tried to scroll through the torrent of information. His mouth hung open, his breathing becoming shallow and ragged. Suddenly, a holographic projection materialized in the center of the table, emanating from the neural device. It was a memory, a snippet from John's mind, rendered with astonishing clarity. The Atrians saw a vast, sprawling city, unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Towers of impossible height pierced a sky choked with smog, yet beneath the grime, there was an undeniable beauty in the intricate architecture, the vibrant lights, the sheer audacity of it all. They saw vehicles, millions of them, rushing along multi-layered highways, a chaotic dance of metal and energy. The sound, translated directly from John's memory, was deafening. A symphony of horns, engines, countless human voices. "What is this?" Xylar whispered, utterly mesmerized. Threll, still fixated on his datapad, managed to choke out, "Early Earth Urban Center circa 21st century." The image shifted, and now they were in a dark, confined space. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and fear. The sounds of desperate shouts and the metallic clang of weapons echoed around them. Humans, their faces grim and determined, were huddled together, defending a narrow corridor against an unseen enemy. Explosions rocked the room, and the Atrians felt a jolt of pure terror as a human, covered in grime and blood, roared defiance at the encroaching darkness. "Conflict, military, a siege," Threll stammered, his body beginning to tremble. The hologram flickered again, and now they were in a different scene entirely. A barren, windswept plain under a sky of swirling, alien colors. A small group of humans, clad in bulky suits, were painstakingly setting up equipment, their faces obscured by visors. One of them, a woman, turned and looked out at the desolate landscape, her posture radiating an unshakable resolve. She was utterly alone, yet utterly unbroken. Exploration, a new world, the very edge of the known galaxy. Threll's voice was barely a whisper now. His body had begun to spasm, his scaled skin taking on an unnatural, pale hue. Xylar watched, horrified, as the images flashed by, an unrelenting torrent of human experience. He saw moments of profound joy, a child's laughter echoing through a sunlit field, lovers embracing under a starlit sky, families gathered around a festive table. He saw moments of unimaginable sorrow, faces contorted in grief, silent tears falling onto freshly turned earth, the quiet despair of loneliness. He saw acts of breathtaking cruelty, humans inflicting pain on other humans, wars that scarred entire continents, moments of unthinking brutality. And then, almost immediately, he saw acts of astonishing compassion. Hands reaching out to help, sacrifices made for strangers, lives dedicated to healing and protecting. The sheer volume of emotion, of experience, was overwhelming. It wasn't just individual memories. It was the collective consciousness, the echoes of billions of lives spanning millennia. The Atrians, a species that valued logic, order, and control above all else, were being bombarded with the messy, glorious, terrifying chaos of humanity. Threll let out a pained shriek, clutching his head. The datapad clattered to the floor, its screen displaying a chaotic swirl of neural patterns, impossible to decipher. The holographic projection flickered wildly, the images accelerating, overlapping, becoming a dizzying kaleidoscope of human existence. Xylar watched as Threll's eyes rolled back in his head, a thin stream of greenish fluid beginning to trickle from his mandibles. The researcher was experiencing a complete system overload, his mind unable to process the sheer, unbridled intensity of human reality. "Shut it down!" Xylar roared, scrambling towards the controls. But his scaled hands fumbled, his own mind reeling from the residual psychic echoes emanating from the device. He felt a tremor in his own controlled psyche, a faint echo of the human emotional storm that threatened to engulf them all. John, his eyes still closed, seemed to absorb the mental maelstrom with a serene calm. He wasn't resisting, he was simply enduring, and by enduring, he was revealing. The hologram settled on a single image, freezing the chaotic torrent into a moment of poignant beauty. It was a human hand, scarred and calloused, gently cradling a tiny, fragile bird that had fallen from its nest. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow on the scene. The image pulsed with an overwhelming sense of tenderness, of a quiet, fierce protectiveness. Then, John's eyes snapped open. He looked at the two Atrians, one twitching uncontrollably on the floor, the other frozen in horror, his body rigid, his breathing shallow. "See," John said, his voice quiet, almost mournful. "I told you it might be unsettling." The neural device powered down, the hum dying, the electrodes retracting. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by Threll's whimpering and Xylar's ragged gasps. Xylar slowly turned his gaze to John. The human sat there, perfectly still, his blue eyes holding a depth that Xylar suddenly realized he had utterly failed to perceive. He had seen John as a simple subject, a species to be categorized and controlled. Now, he saw a living, breathing paradox. What was that?" Xylar finally managed to whisper, his voice rough with shock. John sighed. "That was just a small taste, Commander. A little glimpse into what it means to be human. The good, the bad, the ugly, the utterly inexplicable. We love, we hate, we build, we destroy, we create beauty from chaos, and chaos from order. We laugh at our own folly and weep for our own mistakes. We reach for the stars even as we cling to the dirt beneath our feet." He paused, a faint, melancholic smile returning to his lips. "And sometimes, Sometimes we get lost. And when we get lost, we try to fix things. Even if it means accidentally redirecting a few of your mining facilities with a quantum flux anomaly and some well-aimed Nerf darts. Xylar looked at Threll, who was now curled into a fetal position, muttering incoherently about infinite variables and unpredictable emotional vectors. The formidable Atrian researcher, renowned for his mental fortitude, had been utterly broken by a mere sliver of human experience. The commander's own mind felt altered. He had always viewed emotions as a weakness, a chaotic force to be suppressed in the pursuit of logical efficiency. But what he had just witnessed was not weakness. It was a raw, undeniable power, a force of nature, untamed and unconquerable. He saw the wars, the suffering, the cruelty, and he felt a brief, instinctive revulsion. But then he remembered the hand cradling the bird, the quiet acts of heroism, the relentless pursuit of knowledge even in the face of despair. He saw the capacity for both immense darkness and unimaginable light coexisting within the same fragile vessel. We didn't understand, Xylar admitted, the words feeling alien and clumsy in his mandibles. We saw a species that defied our logic, and we attempted to force it into our framework. John nodded. That's a common mistake. With humans, there is no framework. Or rather, the framework is constantly shifting, evolving, breaking, and rebuilding itself. We are a species of contradictions, Commander. A species that will risk everything for a cause and then squabble over the smallest triviality. Xylar felt a profound sense of humility, something he hadn't experienced in centuries. He, the hardened interrogator of the Atrian hegemony, had been utterly unprepared for the sheer, unadulterated humanity of his subject. He had expected secrets, conspiracies, hidden agendas. He had found something far more complex, far more challenging. So, you truly were just lost? Xylar asked, the question laced with a hesitant uncertainty that was entirely uncharacteristic. John shrugged. Mostly, and I really was trying to avoid hitting your stuff. And those Nerf darts, they're actually quite good for self-defense when you don't want to cause permanent injury. Xylar stared at him, then at his convulsing colleague. The charges against John suddenly seemed utterly trivial, lost in the overwhelming tide of what they had just witnessed. How could you apply standard hegemony law to a species that contains such an astonishing, bewildering universe within itself? What do you want? Xylar asked, the question escaping him before he could censor it. John looked genuinely surprised. Want? I just want to go home, Commander, and maybe get my FTL drive fixed. And perhaps, if it's not too much trouble, a cup of coffee. Real coffee. None of that nutrient paste you call a beverage. Xylar blinked, his multifaceted eyes slowly focusing on the mundane request. After the cosmic journey through John's mind, the desire for a simple cup of coffee felt profoundly, beautifully human. He looked at the still trembling Threll, then back at John, who was now patiently waiting, a faint, expectant smile on his face. The Atrian hegemony had spent millennia trying to categorize, understand, and control the myriad species of the galaxy. They had always believed that with enough data, enough logic, any being could be dissected and managed. But humanity was an anomaly, a glorious, terrifying, beautiful anomaly that defied all classification. Xylar activated his comms, his voice still a little shaky. Release subject John. Provide him with a full diagnostic of his vessel and facilitate immediate repairs. And procure some coffee. Explain the situation to the customs agents. He is a unique case. The guards outside, having heard the strange sounds and commotion within the chamber, looked at each other in confusion. They had never heard Commander Xylar sound so utterly. Bewildered John stood up, stretching his limbs, a faint crackle of joints echoing in the silent room. He glanced at Threll, still whimpering on the floor, and a look of genuine regret crossed his face. "I am truly sorry about your colleague, Commander," he said, his voice soft. "I tried to warn you." Xylar simply nodded, still processing the immense shift in his worldview. He watched as John walked towards the door, his seemingly ordinary human gait now imbued with an almost mythic significance as John reached the exit. He paused, turning back to face Xylar. "You know," he said, a mischievous glint in his blue eyes, "I actually did have a backup plan for getting out of here. Involved a lot of glitter and a particularly loud kazoo." Xylar stared, speechless. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated humanity of it all. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.